When we host events and I don't know who the presenter is, I always say I'm going to let him introduce himself. So Chris Wink, I'm from Technically. I come here probably for two reasons. I'm a co-founder. We're an 8-person full-time, 12-person with independent contractors and freelancers. So we're like a 15 to 20-person organization, half of whom are full-time. So have an entrepreneurial story ourselves. We also are a news site. So what we actually are at our core is we're reporting on technology and entrepreneurship in 5 markets. We're in Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Baltimore, DC, and as of very recently, Delaware, which spent a month ago. And we can talk about what that decision was. So theoretically, we covered a whole lot of entrepreneurs and had a lot of conversations in what has changed in the entrepreneurial and technology community over the past 15 years. We've reported in the last 5, but do a lot of retrospective lookbacks. And had a small example and experience myself. So Ben and I were talking, I'm by core a reporter, so I would much rather a conversation and talking about it. I can do a little setup, but I'd love to talk about what you guys are seeing or excited by, hear what you guys are working on, and maybe share some thoughts on what we've seen in reporting and experiencing ourselves. But quickly set it up. I'm one of the co-founders. We started covering Philly first, and one of the biggest changes over the past really 30 years, you could say, in the technology and entrepreneurship things is the sense of place in our idea, meaning dot-com era technology, the 90s era first wave of web-based technologies. It was really freaking expensive to launch any kind of technology. An open source movement hadn't gotten to the web. Cloud-based hosting was not readily available to a consumer space. So if you wanted to get a product to market, you were spending a lot of money to do that. You had to buy literal servers. Like when you talk to college entrepreneurs from 20 years ago, they had to buy a frickin' server and have it in their office. That's crazy, right? So we found that technology entrepreneurs were finding themselves in suburban communities where traditional money was, because they needed a lot of money to launch their product. 25 years later, the real source everyone's looking for is talent. And I'm focusing on technology entrepreneurship, but I can widen it too for those who are interested in other entrepreneurial ventures. But in a knowledge worker economy of today, the need is talent. People with software programming skills, people with creative class, knowledge worker experience. So companies are forming where they want to be, which in our bet is often happening in more urbanist communities. Walkable density. Even a place like Newark has some of that density. So the change was, in 1993, the companies went to the money. Now the companies are going to where the talent is, and then the money's following it. So we started as a news site covering technology locally, which is a strange thing, right? Because technology is supposed to scale. So traditionally technology news, your tech crunches cover nationally or globally because it's meant to be replicated wherever you are. Our big idea was that technology communities are going to shape the way any city, place, market, town is going to be organized in the future. And so we wanted to be really deeply connected to the sense of place. So we cover, at our core, non-traditional markets. We're covering Brooklyn, not covering Manhattan. We're covering Baltimore, not covering Baltimore County, where a lot of money is, Towson. We're covering DC, not Northern Virginia. We're covering Philadelphia, not western suburbs. And in all those cases, the idea was we are covering where the people are, that first core of 20 to 30-somethings who are making decisions largely about sense of place and quality of life. And we find that the companies are increasingly following them. So the first kind of big idea that I think is a change that you guys can all recognize is 20 years ago, you would have gone to somewhere where there was a lot of rich people to give you money to start something. And now you increasingly are going to where either your market is or where you yourself want to be, and then you build around yourself. That's an editorial change that we report on and we live ourselves. And it's fun to have that experience because these are two worlds that are bridging. That's probably the biggest concept of where we are. We do a lot of events, which for us is an interesting addition to toss out here before maybe we can get to a little bit more of a conversation. So our revenue model, we're under $750,000 in revenue. So we're a small business. We're again 8 full-time. Under $750,000 revenue, about 65% of that is event sponsorship. We host an event, we bring people together. People that want to be around those people give us some money to have closer access. Those two core audiences tend to be technologists first and entrepreneurs later. Usually somewhat more seasoned, but certainly in a pipeline of early stage entrepreneurs. So that's also an ironic thing, right? Like technology, we've talked about for 15 years that video conferencing was going to make a sense where you could go anywhere and be placeless, so why would place matter? Again, place matters a lot to us. In-person events is how we connect and bridge communities. The meetup phenomenon, who is part of a meetup group? Like a meetup.com meetup group. This may be before it'll be in your world. That's cool. No, that's weird. So meetup.com is actually one of the older and I think should be better respected social networks because it actually has a profit model. You pay to launch meetups. It has always had a revenue model. They're incredibly important to technology communities and entrepreneurial communities around the country. And those are like 25-person meetups of like the Baltimore DB community, if you're a database developer. And why I think that's interesting is why are 25 cats who are doing DB development showing up for like crappy pizza and soda, because they want to learn from each other to build a sense of community. And so what the web has done has not made it less likely for us to connect together. It's made it a lot easier for us to find people who are like-minded. So the web is a tool for us to communicate and organize ourselves better. If you want to find like the left-handed clown association, there probably is a left-handed clown association, right? Because like the web, you can find these incredibly niche verticals. We're doing geographic and topical specificity in non-traditional markets, technology news by geography. That's incredibly specific, and we are under 250,000 page views a month. By web traffic, that is nothing. We're a full-time business, not because of our scale, but because of our focus, which I think is probably a third leg that we found. The idea of niche product, that for us, we don't need a lot of money. We can lift and sustain a market for under $100,000. We don't need a wide audience. In fact, it's usually disruptive. So maybe the leg there is the page view phenomenon. If any of you are in web-based businesses, and I'd like to hear what everyone's working on in a minute. The page view phenomenon for me is broken because I don't really care if I get a huge Reddit hit. For a story, like we did in Baltimore, this entrepreneur and muralist is building the world's largest urban street park under a highway. Got permission from State Transportation Authority, where this graffiti scene is, and is building out a place to build this urban street park. We did a really big story on that with lots of photos. It went super viral because it got shared in international graffiti communities. That probably did. When we do our traffic, we take that story out because it's so irrelevant to what our business model is. So that alone, that story probably did as much traffic as the rest of our entire Baltimore site for a year did. But we do less than 5% of revenue on advertising, so it doesn't matter. Page views do not do anything for me. I want technologists and entrepreneurs who are actually in my community, who find my content to be valuable, strong, and relevant, and who are actually doing interesting work. So I'd rather 15 of the best people in the room than 100 people who just showed up for the free beer. And I think that is something that the web is having these two spectrums, right? Like you're having incredibly high scale national, right? Like the BuzzFeed story of 0 to 1,000 in 3 years. You're having those phenomenons, and then you're having incredibly niche verticals. So that's maybe just a piece that I would encourage you all to think about, that you should choose one of those paths and not try to do both, I think. Huge scale is sexy, right? Like that's how you can get on, time. I don't know. No one's gonna ever put me on time for a niche vertical focused on a hyper-local community. But I think I'm providing value to that community. I think we've learned a lot of lessons, and we're building a sustainable business that's having impact. So that's a leg. Like the web has shaped that. Let me stop for a second, because Ben and I were talking a little bit about where people come from. I'd be curious, we mentioned like either the variety of, you actually are working on a venture yourself, thinking about working on a venture, or just kind of curious about this space. So can we do like a little like inevitable arm raise game? of those three options. I know like probably every idiot comes through here does that, but whatever, I'm gonna do it anyway. But again, like have a venture, thinking about a venture, want to know what the heck's going on in this space. So like I have a venture. That's cool. Who like thinking about a venture in mind. That's cool. And who's like just kind of curious about the space. All right. Who did not put their hand up because I didn't know what I was talking about, or it was a totally different category I ignored. All right, maybe everyone. All right, so good call, Ben. You got that. I would love to do like more questions, as I said, than anything. So maybe to set up so it's not just incredible silence. My perspective is probably over the past 6 to 7 years of my life, gotten to speak to a lot of entrepreneurs in these communities, and also seen some changes about location. So anyone have thoughts about like what you're trying to do or where you're trying to do it might actually also make sense. The inevitable, am I going to the Bay Area because like, I watched the Facebook movie. Where are you going to like, who's graduating next spring? So how many of you are going to be in Newark after you graduate? So where are you going and why? Anyone? You the last one looked at me, so now I'm going to stare at you. Good. Okay, cool.
Why not?
That's a good answer. So you don't know. Do you think you'll start a venture, or do you think you want to like learn learn first and then return to?
I think learn first.
Yeah.
And then in the future, like I this.
So why is the presumption not here? If you don't know what next, why? That's interesting. So is that like like I feel like that we're only a month old in covering like Delaware, and I think that's a theme. So Ben, let me return to something that Ben and I were talking about, and I like to come to that. Again, a sense of place. So like we're Northeast Corridor. Our idea has been the Amtrak corridor, right? Like every Amtrak stop is an opportunity to build community. I don't own a car. I had to borrow a friend's car to get here. I bicycle or take transit. So I'm much, and I'll say, plug for Delaware, I go to Wilmington, and I do walk out and go to, co-working spaces and tech spaces, so Delaware does have a leg of that, so don't dismiss it as only being kind of like a big city thing. We're watching, and Newark has obviously transit access as well, we're watching small to mid-sized communities build out urbanism as well, so I want to say that. But so for sense of place, two other trends that Ben and I were briefly talking about that I think can tie really nicely to this framed conversation is I believe that, so every like crappy web news publication of the last 5 years has done the 10 startup hubs that are the coolest places ever to live. And you go there and you're like, all right, maybe I should go to Raleigh because they said so. And I think why that's asinine is I don't think we're at a point where we're going to have these like, here is the list of the 30 tech hubs and it's in order and that's the best place to be and you can only climb them as you want to. I think we're in an incredible paradigm shift for two reasons. One, every industry and mankind will have technology solutions. We will increasingly stop calling them technology solutions, but right now we will. So like e-commerce will stop being called e-commerce. Like, don't say you have an e-newsletter. You have a newsletter, right? Like, in 2003, you had an e-newsletter. Now it's just a freaking newsletter, because stop mailing newsletters. So I think similarly, e-commerce is going to become commerce, right? Like, if you have a bricks and mortar shop, you're going to have a web vertical to also support that. So when every industry needs technology talent, every community will have a technology community, because you will need it. In a post-recession reality that our only solution for 10% unemployment in most larger markets is we got to start new jobs. That's going to mean an incredible obsession for the next 5 to 10 years of entrepreneurship, right? So like that means there's going to be a whole like I'm so excited for like the big brother of startup community. Like we're going to have the reality realization like beyond Shark Tank. We're going to have this continued media obsession with entrepreneurship. And then like 20 years from now, people will make fun of how we were all obsessed with starting our own business. Like that'll be how people will make fun of this era. Like you had a business plan, we will be made fun of. It's like the scrunchy of 2014. So that's going to be this moment in time. So these two things are happening where every community is going to have an entrepreneurial sector. I guarantee it. And every community will have a technology class because you will need it. And that, I think that ranges in every place, every size. It'll vary in focus, it'll vary in strength to some degree, but if you want to be in a place, you will have those people. And it's just a question of how quickly those are developing. And the arms race that's happening right now, every economic development group is hosting a conference about how we're going to become the next Silicon Valley of online sock sales or something. Right? Like every market's trying to find their thing. First side note, again, stop saying you're the Silicon Valley of anything. I hate everyone who says that. So if you do, I apologize, but stop. You're not. Like, the Bay Area is like a third of venture money in the world. It is the most risk-tolerant place in the planet. That's great. I don't live there, and I don't feel any need to. I'm really happy it exists for our world. I'm really happy that crazy, risky, bizarre things can be experimented with and happen there. That's not the world that I want to live in, and I don't think that's the world that many of us want to live in, honestly, or should. I'm much more interested in building businesses that can sustain. I'm really interested in bootstrapping culture. Venture money is really good for scalability, but me and my co-founders own our entire company. We're not worth a lot of money, but I've paid myself for 5 years. I've paid a staff. We've never not met payroll. It's super stressful, but I don't have an investor demanding what I do. And so venture money is really good for specific ideas, but it's not good for all. And so when we stop saying we have to create or compete with a valley, because you will not. Like, Delaware is not the Silicon Valley of anything and never will be, and that's fine. It's not what you should be. For a variety of reasons, there's a huge finance community, and I'm really excited for Wilmington, and I think broader Delaware to see, northern Delaware can have this real impact on the finance sector. It really ought to. I think southern Delaware has really interesting agribusiness opportunities. I think the Rehoboth, there's a co-working space there that we cover a bit. And it's interesting, those are people who want to hang out and have web design businesses and surf. So those are web communities that are developing by where people want to be, right? So no longer are you saying I need to go to the Bay Area, I need to get that check. You don't need that fat check no more. You can lift the product. We were up until like a year and a half ago, we were a $50 WordPress theme, $12.99 a month in hosting, and desperation. That's what we were. And that's changed dramatically, but we didn't need venture money to do that. It was like every slow slog along the way. I love reminding myself, I made $19,000 my first year out of college. I was living in like a mouse-infested apartment in a shitty neighborhood of Philadelphia, and across from a gregarious but a drug dealer. It was very sweet, but it was awful. It was terrible. It was the worst year of my entire life. But we grew a business, and I work in it. So that happened in Frankfurt, and that's a terrible neighborhood right now. I'm sure it'll change. It has nice things too. But that theme, though, runs through, we didn't need venture money. We're a web business. We have some replicable portions. We have some technology that could scale, but that wasn't what we needed. So let me come back around and say, to reframe the sense of place, if you want to do a risk-tolerant, highly scalable technology solution, and you need early-stage risky money, and you want to live the scrunchy life of 2014, the Bay Area is totally, I get it, and I applaud it, and we cover people, and we'll cover that movement, and I think that makes sense. If you're in ad tech, or you want to have access to Fortune 100, New York's a totally sensible place to be there. That makes sense, and if you want to make a logical decision about where to be, I'm always for that. Cost of talent will be exorbitant, but what Ben and I were talking about is we are not. Sometimes we get billed as the anti-valley thing. Like a lot of other tech verticals are usually very oriented toward the valley, and obviously we're distinctly not. But I think for me it's been very important to convey that we have no bias. We have this sense that I don't think people always make choices rationally. I think actually we rarely make choices rationally. It's very emotionally driven. If everyone put their hands up and said, I'm going to stay in Delaware, everyone would have. If no one does, no one will. And I think that's the sense for a lot of place. And a leg there on the community side that I'd like to actually share, because I think what's fun about being in 5 markets is we've seen the variety of spectrums. So like the Brooklyn scene was really advanced in the creative sector, but not in the technology community, because largely you were living in Brooklyn and working in Manhattan if you were at a technology firm. So the Brooklyn tech scene wasn't really mature. DC has been really dominated by federal government, so its early stage, non-regulated industry technology community was not really vibrant. So despite being those billed as international cities, it really did not have very mature, savvy technology communities. In the last 5 years, that's changing rapidly in all of these places. But the variety and place and spectrum that we have technology communities today, it's not an either or. It's not the Bay Area has a tech scene and Delaware doesn't. It's Delaware somewhere different in that pathway. And something Ben and I also talked about is the way communities built, and I'm talking more than I said I was going to, so I'm going to switch out. But the way community is built, and this goes like, think about this, every community, like whatever community means, topical, geographical, whatever. Restaurant scene, or like my neighborhood, or an arts community, or an entrepreneurship scene. The only way that gets built is by like-minded people coming together, right? That's the theme between all of them. This is the development of a community. The Horn program is a development of a community. It's a place where like-minded people can come together. You meet other people. You're like, that person's not an idiot. Okay, all right, cool. That person can form sentences. That's how we're like, all right, I could do this. And we're constantly evaluating whatever community we're entering and deciding if it's a place that makes sense for us, if it supports us. And the way we fill holes that we don't know is usually through media, right? Like what do the movie, television, and articles I read suggest that I should know or expect? And when it's so dominated by technology and entrepreneurship only happens in the Bay Area, and only recently talking about New York as a secondary market, in Boston in robotics and life sciences in some places, when it's only there's a whole class of people from like the rest of the country who's saying, okay, well, I guess I have to go to one of those three places because I got to do that. And that can be valuable if you need to, but not if you don't. You guys know Steve Case, the investor Steve Case? Raise your hand if you do. That's cool if you don't. That's actually cool. So Steve Case is he was one of the co-founders of AOL. He did it in Northern Virginia, which in late 80s, early 90s was a very strange thing. It was a totally weird move. He built it, grew it, made a bucket load of money. It has a venture firm called Revolution, and he does early stage investment, but he's also doing this bus tour, and like bus tours are like always the lamest thing ever. But his is not so lame. So have you heard of the phrase "rise of the rest"? Who's heard that phrase? That's cool. So Fareed Zakaria is a Newsweek writer. He wrote this book like maybe 15 years ago about BRIC nations, like in foreign policy, talking about countries rising up and competing with American economic dominance. But it's been appropriated first by Steve Case, but a wider community for the technology communities that are growing today. Rise of the rest, meaning once the Bay Area did a 90s era surge of technology, and there was a diaspora of really smart people who went back home and had worked for Vertical Net or all of these these 90s era firms. They came back with experience, and then the blog launched in 2002. And there's hundreds of blogs of entrepreneurs and investors. Maybe you're reading some of them, people writing about how you do this. There's a whole second and third wave of entrepreneurship that's happening everywhere. Places like this open up in the last 5 years. Like this is unheard of, even 10 to 15 years ago. And so the rise of the rest conversation is that we are going to watch every community have an entrepreneurial sector. We're going to watch every community have a technology sector. So that's worth at least kind of conveying that point. That sense of place is a very mobile thing. That we fall in love with a place when we're in it, not with a place, because places change dramatically, right? Like I fell in love with Denver 1987, and I stayed because I fell in love with it then. I didn't actually. That's just me talking about someone else. That was another person. I've been to Denver Twice. It's very nice. So that's a rant there on the sense of place that I think is really impacting where technology and entrepreneurship is happening. So anyway, I'm never staying in Delaware thing, which again, I like Delaware, but I much more rather have an open conversation. I'm curious to see, does anyone have the I'm going to this place because yet, or is it still very much we're figuring that out? I dig that. Yeah.
I feel like I want to go somewhere that's a lot more populated than Delaware,
Yeah.
just because I know making connections is one of the most important things. And
Yeah.
say somewhere like New York or Philly or a bigger city, you have the opportunity to go out and meet people every night or every day. And that's important to me. And
Yeah.
you can always meet someone that could be life-changing to you. So.
Yeah, I think it's awesome, and like that's real, right? Like, so I want to convey so much that it's real. My push is that like any community can be built by whomever has it, whoever wants it, right? Like that can exist anywhere. So like the Austin, Texas story, which I'm also super tired of, but so like South by Southwest, and I can't believe I'm talking about South by Southwest. Like, oh God, I'm that guy. But you know, it was a music scene, and it grew, right? Like Austin had no reason to be ever listed as one of like the places to build a tech startup. I think there are a lot of things that went into that, and I think that's much more the exception than the rule. But I think what's worth saying is that like sense of now, right? Like so like Delaware doesn't work for me now is I think a phrase that we all could get more comfortable with, and that could be any place. Like, you know, XYZ doesn't work for me now. But I think the way place changes is also the way communities get built. So like we've done great stuff in the New York scene about like New York is obsessed with how they're not the Valley. So for as much as like in Delaware, I often hear the like, I'm gonna go to New York because that's the big market on the East Coast. The New York tech scene is so self-conscious about not being the Valley. Like it's sickening. I'm so tired of like every story we do is like, oh, but we're almost San Francisco. We're almost like stop. Like good God, people. Like if everyone could just be happy about who they are and be the best version of themselves, I think we'd all be a better place. But so like that for me is just to share that like 10 years ago. Etsy. Have you guys heard of Etsy? Right, so like Etsy is one of the big anchors of the Brooklyn tech scene. Artisanal e-commerce business. When you talk to their founders, they were like, there was no scene when we started here. I couldn't go out. There was no entrepreneurial community. Right? Like if you wanted to go to an art scene, sure, New York had that. They didn't have like an entrepreneurial scene. So they got on the plane a lot and went to the Valley, and that's where they raised their money, and that's where they built their community. But like what's happened over the past 10 years is that has grown and changed a lot. So again, I think no one should ever make you feel badly about making a geographic choice that it's best for your business or for you, but make it for your business or for you. Not because like, top 10 places to go. Make it because you understand why. So yeah. Questions about place, questions about, honestly, I can also talk about the actual our business if anyone's interested in like numbers or like stresses of healthcare choice, yeah.
So you were talking about, you said that the ads and people going on your website doesn't really contribute that much to your overall revenue.
Yep.
So how is your revenue model actually set up?
Yeah, that's good. Let me do that. So 60 to 65% is event sponsorship. So that's like, hey, we have a big community of technologists, our readers, right? Like we get our readers to come out, and usually firms that are interested in hiring technologists and want something different than the traditional recruiting path, they want to be around technologists and convey that they're a cool place to be. We'll do events at people's offices, right? Like, and we throw cool parties, and like come hang out at this party that's at this place. But theoretically, the interesting model that media has always done, like newspapers through today, media was always a middleman, right? It's always what we were. Either we had like the Macy's ad on the Sunday edition that you went out to Macy's, or in our case is we build a big audience and we get them to come out to a party where someone also wants to hang out with them. So most of the revenue, 60-65% is event sponsorship. We have a jobs and gigs board that actually does pretty well, pretty solidly because of our specificity, right? Like really low volume in terms of eyeballs, but those like 150 people who saw that are technologists, it's a Ruby developer who lives in Baltimore who's interested in startups. Oh my God, that's a small funnel, right? So like really highly curated leads. So jobs does about 10 to 15%. We're doing sponsored content for us is growing really quickly. This is something that maybe if anyone's interested in the media space is growing really rapidly. What does that literally mean? It means it's branded content. We do content on our site and sponsors underwrite it. This is being shaped right now what it will look like. There have been advertorials in magazines for a century. What's happening is the web is doing it very differently. and everyone has their own ethical realities. We come from a journalism aesthetic. I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm not a technologist. I was covering like the Harrisburg State House after college. So for us, we had to, and this is a question for anyone, right? Like this is worth, when you're thinking about what my revenue model is, how does it fit into both my mission, my brand, and who I want to be? So for us, the model that some national brands are doing, where like sponsor can write the whole damn thing and like goes in the web unfiltered. For us, we care way too much about quality, right? Like we're very low volume in audience, but it's highly curated. So our sponsored content, which does it's growing. It probably in 2014 will be 10% of revenue. So if we're $650,000, we'll call it $65,000. So not big money, but enough to do full time. And that'll be, that is, client comes, says, hey, so we did one with Silicon Valley Bank. And they're a national bank. They focus on early stage companies. We are in a few of their underperforming markets. And they come in, they talk to our business team first, and they say, we have done events with you guys. We want to continue to be around entrepreneurs. We want to be more intimately involved. Can we do a brand new piece of content? Can we do sponsored content, something of a curated topic that you'll report out? We get the business team involved. The project manager takes that idea. Client does not talk to editorial. There's an editorial wall for us still. But we determine the focus of that content, a headline, we get a freelancer on it, and we report it independently like we would, but with a given topic. So in that case, we suggested that a really important topic for our communities was the hiring crunch. This is immigration policy. This is a college degrees mismatch. There's a shortage of STEM talent nationally. This is not a Delaware problem. This is you go to Bay Area meetups. People are obsessed with not enough being technical talent. So we did a big story that was valuable content that was really well reported about how communities are trying to face the recruiting crunch. Branded Silicon Valley Bank at the top, and it was, 3,000 to 4,000 entrepreneurs read it. Again, low numbers, but for them it was a highly curated list. They did find that they got leads out of that, but again, probably a half dozen. So small numbers in niche media. But so that's probably, call that 10 to 15% of revenue. Ticket sales for some, and advertising less than 5%. But the point is there's a diversity, and in truth, we feel too vulnerable with 60 to 65% of revenue on event sponsorship. That was upwards of 80%. So 2 years ago, we were doing a lot of events in number, and recognized that, any volunteer can organize an event that theoretically could be competitive with us. We don't want to compete with volunteers, right? Because we want to cover them. So we felt like it was off mission for us. So we did far fewer events, but larger ones that were harder to do as a volunteer, that we would have highly programmed events because we had full-time staff to support it. So the thread there is for whatever business you're in, insert any business, is looking at what that revenue stream is and how vulnerable do you feel with that? Like, is that going to be eroded really quickly? So we felt it was too high, and I probably want event sponsorship to be more like half. I want sponsored content to grow because we have an editorial team and a network that can do it well, and we're finding that this is actually worth saying, that we have not found a distinct difference between the level of readership between featured reports we do independently and sponsored featured reports, which we found because we do it of our standards. It's not written by the entity. Our job is to know how to present information to a reader. So that for us, that's an ethical boundary that we had with with sponsors who said, we want full control, and we said it's not good for you, and we wouldn't do it. And actually, can I touch on a follow-up there though? A really important lesson for me in the entrepreneurial side was there's a philosophical moment that I'm still sussing out about when you go from startup to business, and there's a mess of things that go into that. But one philosophical step for me was when you turn down bad money. Like when you start, you'll take any money, man. Like whatever you want me to do. On the software side, that's like building really specific build outs for specific clients. For a restaurant, that's I'll make whatever you want, right? Like whatever your business is, there's some version of I will do whatever the person paying me to do. And we did the same thing. If you called us up like a week before and you wanted an event, fuck it, we'll do it. It was really stressful. It was bad on staff morale. We didn't always do as high quality as we wanted, and our quality turned. So only in the last 18 months, this is not like we're not this long in it. Only in the last 18 months are we getting better at turning down money, and that's not something you'll do right away. Some say you should. I think it's tough to say. But that's a moment that I think if you ever start a venture, you will find that moment where you say, that's bad money. It's a bad client, it's not worth it, it's off mission, it's too much work, and you'll turn it down. And turning down bad money, I think, is one of these monumental moments when you go from startup to actual organization and business. Like if you went to Reebok and said, can I buy a prom dress? They'd say no, because that's not what we do. What? But if you're starting a shoe store, maybe like, I'll get it if you want. If you'll pay me, I'll do it. So that I think is an important step.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah,
What do you do day to day?
So as 3 months ago, a good third of my time I was still editing the product. I was the editorial lead on our team, so I was editing 3 to 5 markets. That, in another one of these steps from business to organization, 8 full-time now with a wider editorial team that's not full-time. I couldn't manage that anymore, so we brought in an editor, which was fun because we got him from public media, so it's cool to be at a point where you are able to poach people from bigger brands. And I am expansion strategy, business development, and still honestly developing what the replicable model is. So we're essentially a services business, right? Like you have the two big worlds, right? Like scalable product and people-powered services. And traditionally, investable businesses are only people-powered. Are only product-driven. And when we're 60% of revenue on events, that makes us a services business. If you want to do more events, you need more people, right? If you want to sell more product, God willing, you don't necessarily strictly need more people, right? That's the hockey curve that investors are obsessed with. So I am now trying to create what we do to be consistent and replicable. So what does that literally mean? Probably 3 things. Longer term national brands. We've never really consistently had national brands sponsoring us because we've been hyper-local focused. Now with a broader corridor, we're at a point where we can do that. So I'm hanging there. I'm still meeting across our 3 teams. So we have an events lead, we have a business lead, and we have an editorial lead. And we don't talk really well to each other. Even 8 people, right? Like 8 people full-time organization, when you build out, everyone has their own focus. So a lot of this is like meeting with editorial and saying, we have this event, what's our strategy for that? We need to find a way to do that. It's very process. Like I'm in Google Docs a lot of what's the process for us to do it. I mean, an example maybe for like this week, yesterday, let's just do yesterday. We're doing more sponsored content, and editorial is really nervous about that, right? Because they come from a journalism side, they're really nervous about the ethics of that. So sitting with editorial and business and trying to find out the real process by which we will determine, you pitch us on a story, is that sponsored content or not? So it was determining that. Then like the more fun side of what I do is the strategic or like longer form stuff. So what we should be in the future, right? Like so theoretically, as you build out a team, your team core job is making sure we're really good at what we're doing today, and my job is making sure we're really good at what we're doing a year from now. And that's in our space. Like, don't be in a business to be cool. It's so hard. So theoretically, we're supposed to be in the business of being cool, which is like so stressful because everyone's a jerk. Because everyone's like wants to be cooler than the next person. So this is like in the fashion space. This is usually in media. Media's obsessed with being cool. Like it's so exhausting because everyone's just a jerk. But so like I concept to be like, how are we going to be cool a year from now? Like the events we did last year, now other people do them. So we still do a not at South by Southwest party in all of our markets. So like during South by, we have a cool party, and it's come out, and it's usually focused for technologists and game developers in all the markets, and come out not at South by. Hashtag not at South by Southwest. I'm not at South by. So all your friends are hashtagging South by, SXXSW. I'm at South by Southwest. And then we have a crew where everyone's going like, I'm not at South by Southwest because like I'm in a place that's meaningful. So that was super cool. a year from now, and in truth, it's still doing well. But I'm like, is that cool 2 years from now? And so I have to do a lot of that. We're doing a lot of not strictly technical events. So I'm doing a lot of that. So we're going to do in DC, we're going to do a big 3-city food truck event. So it'll be food trucks from DC, Philly, and Baltimore in DC, and we'll get 1,000 people out for trying to get a national brand to sponsor it. So like, then we're getting this like creative class space and I have to say, like, am I off mission now? We think it's still relevant because we're going to have a lot of local technology, right? So it'll be food trucks, but it'll also be like the drone company from Baltimore and this robotics firm from DC. So it'll be, you go out and you'll be playing with cool local technology, and the mission side of that would be I'm exposing local communities to this subculture of tech. So that is what a day might look like. Like, I have to shape that programming, and yeah, I'm rapidly becoming less cool, like, every passing day. And so as we build up our organization, like, we need to find new ways to do that. And that's the evolution of almost every organization. Like, cool is not a sustainable resource. And so if you can build your business that is not built on cool, you should. So for us, we're trying to build much more pipeline into technical classes because that's more sustainable. It's like, we're going to stop being cool. Like, we're super cool. Like, we're doing a super meetup in Brooklyn next week, which is just all the different meetup groups come together in technical meetup groups. We have like 350 RCPs, and we had to cap it. Like, we're cool there. We're not going to be cool necessarily in 3 to 5 years. So I have to keep thinking about, like, when I'm not cool, how does our business? And the same way that we got off event sponsorship, we need to keep finding how do we evolve when tech scenes as a whole stop being cool. Like, also, I mean, this is the thing that all of you will do with your own venture. You need to start thinking about what's 3 to 5 years from now. So the scrunchy phenomenon, I think about it all the time. Right now, it is super cool that tech and entrepreneurship. General Motors, GM sponsors us. They shouldn't. They should not sponsor us. Don't tweet that. They shouldn't sponsor us, but it's cool right now. I'm gonna take their money. We'll do stuff, but they shouldn't. They're not our core customer. So when we're building out budgets, part of my job is to recognize that money, that's just funny money. Like it's just they're like, they have FOMO right now, and they want to do stuff. So sure, we'll do it, but that's not my core customer. My core customer is probably an enterprise technical firm that their recruiters can't get them talent, and I need to help them do it. So probably like the company that built your like dermatologist CRM is probably my real client. GM is not. They'll give us cars and shit because, like, why? But that'll be the case for like 3 years, and that'll stop. So understanding cycles and knowing that your business will go through that. Again, like, you're a restaurant or you're a software firm, like, you're going through cycles, and what you do today is not what you'll do 3 years from now. And so you need to help guide your organization that way, and focus on what do you believe can last, and taking in all the different things that are going to happen that are going to change that, I think is a real important step.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.